If I lose the push, I lose my edge.
Never good enough. Always be better. Never be satisfied. These are winning strategies. As it turns out, the growth mindset of effort and progress being more desirable than having to win all the time leads to more success, more happiness, and more connectedness.
If you're ready to unlock more better days, to take control of your health, to push past your limits and unleash your full potential, then you're in the right place. I'm your host, Dr. Jeremy Bettle. For over 2 decades, I've worked with elite athletes and high performers, helping them optimize their bodies, strengthen their minds, and recover from setbacks. Now I'm bringing that expertise to you through the Vitality Collective podcast. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the science, strategies, and real-world solutions you can apply right away. Whether it's enhancing your physical performance, avoiding or recovering from injury, sharpening your mental edge, or simply feeling your best every single day. With insights from top experts and thought leaders, this podcast is designed to help you take action, feel better, and live the life that you deserve. Welcome to the Vitality Collective podcast, where every day is vital.
Witt has spent over 50 years doing therapy, writing, and teaching. More than 75,000 sessions logged. And he keeps coming back on the show for a reason. He gets into the places that most performance conversations never touch. Today, we're going deep on motivation systems. Not the surface level conversations about mindset, but the underlying architecture. Why high performers can achieve everything they set out to do and still feel nothing. And what it actually takes to shift from a system driven by avoiding failure to one built on values. Here's Dr. Keith Witt. Dr. Keith Witt, welcome back to the show.
I'm happy to be here.
We're thrilled to have you back. You are becoming our resident psychologist on the show.
I like it.
We're going to talk about motivation systems today. It's something that you and I have worked on throughout my therapeutic journey with you and my career. The point at which this became really pertinent for me was going through my career and achieving goals that I was convinced I was going to be happy when I achieved them. And then when I got to that goal, man, was I going to be happy when I achieved the next one. And when I just got a little bit more recognition, a little bit more power, a little bit more influence over the system, was I ever going to be happy then? And that just kept repeating over and over with this arrival fallacy. Like when I finally arrived, that was going to fill up whatever I was pursuing. What I recognized about my career, which if you look at my resume, it's a glittering career, but I don't feel like I enjoyed any of it really. And it's only now that I'm starting to enjoy what I'm doing with our own business as a result of the work that we're doing here. Keith, can you explain a little bit about what's going on behind the scenes with that sort of drive and motivation system?
We're born motivated. We have instincts that go back to the beginning of life on this planet, billions of years. And those instincts, none of them disappeared. We just kept adding new ones. Until finally, we come to human beings where we take all the drives and the instincts and we turn them into art. Human beings have multiple hierarchies. We're born into the family. We want to be a good kid. We want to be popular. We want to be successful. We want to win the game. There's a guy in Australia named Max Stevens. He got a hold of me and wanted me to be on a podcast like this and asked me a bunch of questions. His doctoral dissertation is on 2 particular kinds of motivations, compensatory and integrative motivations with high-performing people. He zeroed in on those because there's a lot of motivations that we have because we want to belong, we want to succeed, we want to be the best, we don't want to lose, we want to be recognized, we want those things. There's other motivations that we have of, I want to express something deeply important to me. So you see a little kid drawing, and he's not drawing for his class. He's drawing because he has these crayons, he has this piece of paper, and he sees this sunset, and he wants to make it happen. He wants to create some beauty out of that sunset. That's the integrative motivation. It's coming from a deep value of creating beauty. But then he goes to school and he comes home with a report card. You say he's in 3rd grade and he got 5 A's and a B. And so the first thing that he hears, this is a true story, is, where'd you get that B in? Okay, that's
right.
And so he goes, oh, Bill, I better get A's. So now I want to get A's. Okay. That's a compensatory motivation system. I don't like being criticized, so I'm going to get A's to avoid the criticism and because I'm supposed to be this way. Now, neither one of these are inherently good or bad. Psychopaths have lots of interior motivations to do their horrible psychopath stuff. Okay. So I would say that is an unhealthy version of an integrative motivation system. But mostly when we develop towards integrative systems. Now, development is specifically knowing more, being able to do more. It's easy to see physically. Kids know more and are able to do more as they develop. You can see it cognitively. You can measure it. They know more. They're able to do more. Reading, math, achievement. And as you develop, your moral system develops. Your motivation systems also develop. In your system, celebrating victory was attacked. And so it was literally morally wrong to celebrate victory because you're an honorable guy. You didn't secretly celebrate victory. You just didn't feel great after a victory. Okay. Being a virtuous person. And this is a big deal because humans are ultra social. We're not just a social species. We're an ultra social species. Like ants are ultra social species, bees. So we're like that, only we're formal operational or more cognitively. In ultra social species, you really, really want to fit in. So conformist worldviews, which is when you right after egocentric, when kids are developing, they become conformists. They want to fit in. They want to follow the sacred rules. They want to be accepted, that kind of stuff. As you begin to develop, maybe your conformist rules go against somewhat your interior sense of right and wrong is. For instance, in fundamentalist communities of all sorts, fundamentalists define themselves by an in crowd and an out crowd, and the out crowd has less human rights than the in crowd. That's the definition. And all of us are natural conformists from about 5 to 10, 11. Some of us for the rest of our lives, some of us not, all of us to some extent. Well, it might feel wrong to a kid, I'm supposed to see this other group as not having the same rights as me. That we can be cruel to them in ways that it's not moral to be cruel to members of our group. So now we have a conflict between what my inner sense and what's happening. And this conflict with his inner sense, all of us are born with at least 6 moral foundations that this is the human legacy. Jonathan Haidt did this research. You can read about it in his book, The Righteous Mind. And these 6 moral foundations, these are in us, all of us. And the form come from ourselves, our cultures, from our families, from our personalities, from mysterious places. And so as we mature, as we become more rational, 11, 12, 13, brains evolve and mature to be able to be what's called formal operational. You can look at both sides of an issue. 7-year-olds have trouble with that. If you tell 7-year-olds to take one side of an argument, take another side of an argument, you're just going to irritate them. They go, what do you mean? You tell a 12-year-old, they'll go, okay, I get that. They can debate. Their brains are complex enough to be able to do that. So at that level, people begin to say, well, tell me why this particular standard or this rule is happening. Not just tell me what the rule is. Thou shalt not. Why shall I not? And what you're doing there is beginning at that point, as you begin to question the world and balance it off of your own inner voices, you're beginning to have a sense of what your interior value landscape is, which is always emerging and evolving. And as it emerges and evolves, you get clear about what your values are. And as you get clear about what your values are, you get clear about what kind of behaviors and actions and thoughts and relationships are consistent with your values and which ones violate the values. And when humans experience themselves as violating values, they feel shame emotions. This is a capacity that comes online about 1 year old that motivate us to follow values or to avoid the shame by getting into defensive states and so on. And those are drivers. They drive us to either avoid whatever it is we're ashamed of, but also if we look into it, they drive us to refine our value systems and grow. And as we grow, our motivations become more consistent with what we feel like our core values are. And what Max observed is that there are a lot of high performance. He worked with very successful people, a lot of CEOs, COOs, CFOs. And there are a lot of them that were high performers who were doing pretty well, physically, psychologically and physically.
Yeah.
A lot of them were stressed beyond belief. And he found that one of the differences was that the people who were really stressed, they had compensatory motivation systems. They had to succeed or they identified themselves as worthless. They had to win or they identified themselves as a failure, things like that. And so much of their sense of self was on the line. They felt if they were working, they were being virtuous. And if they were taking time to themselves, they were being lazy and not virtuous. And so they felt great working 15 or 16-hour days and exhausted. This is to a certain extent an American pathology as much as a Western pathology. It's more Western industrialized pathology. I mean, Japan has it too. Japan and the United States routinely trade places as the countries where there's the most hours that people work. And in those cultures, there's a lot of support for the people who work themselves to death.
Well, that's interesting because I was going to say that, like, it's sort of a reinforcing culture, isn't it? It certainly was for me in sport. You were actually derided if you were there. If you weren't the first in the building, it's like everyone crept in earlier, right? The head coach was there at 5, and so the assistant coach had to be there at like 4:45. They didn't do anything for like 4 hours until the players got there. They're all on the internet, like reading the hockey reports. If you walked in at what was a normal time to walk into a practice facility, you're getting heckled all the way by. Oh, good afternoon, all this sort of stuff. If you weren't there on a day off, right? Again, we structured it so people could have a day off. But then one person who was supposed to be off came in, got a pat on the back from the coach. So now everybody else starts coming in on a day off. So it's challenging to not fall into the trap, but it's also challenging because a lot of this creates success.
Well,
right?
yes.
So
there's different kinds of success. I mean, one success is actually having effective, say, practice or change, that kind of stuff, as in, as evidenced by a great book called The Talent Code, where they talk about actually developing mastery in things.
Yes.
And the other one is success in terms of being admired in a system. And so to be accepted and admired, or to not be derided, now I need to conform. And if conforming violates my own personal values, which it did obviously with you coming in and early for no apparent reason, that creates conflict. And so you got a compensatory goal and a motivation system kind of at war with an integrative motivation system, because there's a part of you that goes, anytime that you're in a highly competitive culture, like pro sport, any bullshit is an advantage to your opponents. Okay, so you're in there and you're seeing a certain kind of bullshit being normalized in your team, and somehow this is giving somebody else an advantage over your team. So you, Jeremy, are hired to be Mr. High Performance. Okay. So Mr. High Performance tells these guys, this culture that you have of wasting time, this culture that you have of competing with who can be the most stressed, is giving somebody else an advantage over us. And let's change it so that now we have the advantage of whoever else is doing this someplace. Almost certainly are, because this is rampant in sport in general and pro sport in particular. Now we're running into a cultural thing, because all cultures are hierarchical.
Right.
And one of the things that we want to do is we want to have position in personally important hierarchies. So that's an intense motivation system that we all have. And again, this is genetic. When you walk into a room and there's people in that room, there's a part of your brain that measures where you fit in the social hierarchy of that room. And if you're not treated in a way that's commensurate with wherever you believe your status is, you'll protest. It'll bother you. And it's kind of funny. So you go to a party. Halloween is a good one. So in a Halloween, if you're in a college town, there's a lot of young women competing to see who's the sexiest. They want to be at the top of that hierarchy. Now, I'm not criticizing that. It's fine to want to be the sexiest. It's fine to even compete for it. So getting back to what you said, so say you make it. You need to enjoy it. If you don't, there's something going on, some problem. If you lose, sure, you're going to be disappointed. We never lose the fear of losing, being disappointed, that kind of stuff. That's inevitable. But if that's the number one motivation, I got to win, I can't lose, I'm never satisfied, you suffer. And also, it's a blind spot.
I think that I recognize that in my journey, and I certainly see it in many high performers that I have and currently work with. The striving for external validation. Yeah. And I thought that was really interesting what you said earlier was the external validation versus striving to achieve mastery.
Yeah.
We might both end up at the same place. But I think for me, I achieved mastery, achieved things that nobody else in sport achieved, but couldn't see it.
Yeah, couldn't feel it.
Still wanted, couldn't feel it, couldn't recognize it in myself. Was always looking at other people thinking, well, that person's better at this than me. This person's better than that than me. I wanted to be the best in the world, but never felt the satisfaction of it because I was waiting for someone else to tell me.
Well, and even when someone else told you, that it didn't register with joy. Now, and paradoxically, that limited you.
Right.
You know, that's a limitation. And so to continue to grow, part of your developmental challenge was to feel appropriate joy with success and victory. And so, as a conscientious person, you're highly conscientious. You've been working at it, and we'll work at it, and we'll always work at it, and you'll get better and better and better at it. But you're never going to be as good at it as somebody who is born able to just celebrate success, do a happy dance every time they won something.
Yeah.
Okay, those people, they will always have more joy. It just started out, like with a boost, because 75% of personality is hardwired. It's genetic. And so all of us have things that we do more easily, things that are more difficult for us, including things like celebrating success and being distressed on failure.
Tell me about the celebrating success, the feeling joy bit, because I had this conversation last night, right? And the response was, well, when I stopped drinking, really the celebration of the victories stopped. You see people like Tom Brady, they win a Super Bowl and they don't even go to the after party. Nick Saban wins a national championship and he's on the recruiting portal on the bus on the way back to the hotel, And it's these people who have that external, that person is successful, but like what's going on in here can't be all that fun. And the celebration doesn't have to look like wearing the ski goggles and spraying champagne around the room every time you sign a new client or you win a, whatever.
Yeah.
So what does that look like in terms of experiencing joy and satisfaction that comes from within versus external?
Motivation systems and values can evolve, just like everything else, every other part of us. They don't have to, but they can. I don't know if Nick Saban was feeling a sense of joy of accomplishment and gratitude that he got to be Nick Saban. He got to be the guy. I mean, Nick Saban and that you're describing, and Tom Brady too. They just happened to be partly the right person with the right mastery in the right set of systems that turned out to be sustainable success systems. And who knows? I mean, maybe they were just feeling a lot of joy and a lot of gratitude. I get to be in the system. And maybe that's where a lot of his joy comes from, finding the next new recruit, finding the next great. I don't know. We'd have to check in with his inner experience. There's a thing called Criterion velocity. Criterion velocity is the ratio of how much you achieve over how much you expect to achieve. On a given day, if I expect to get this 4 things done, and I get 4 things done, I have a criterion velocity of 1, 4/4.
Mm-hmm.
If I expect to get 4 things done and I get 3 things done, oh no, I have a criterion velocity of 0.75. If what your motivation system turns into is a growth mindset, mastery-oriented motivation system, which is what I want is to move forward each day and have a day that has a certain kind of harmony.
Mm-hmm.
By harmony, I mean self-care, relational care, spiritual connectedness, professional movement, whatever, personal meaning. I mean, I'm talking about Keith's life now.
Yeah.
But if each one of those has gotten a little bit of attention, personal gratification, then at the end of the day, my standard is to declare victory.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I made progress for me, what do I expect? I expect some progress. What did I get? Progress. I got a criterion velocity of 1. I'm grateful. And what you want is you want that to be your primary, your fundamental, okay? The superordinate motivation system. If I put something out, like Max and I wrote a paper on this, that you read, I sent it to you. We're journal now. I'd like some great journal to accept our paper, and I'd like people to love our paper and quote it a lot. So sure. If nobody accepts it or if nobody quotes it, I don't like that. Okay. So that system's still there. If somebody's listening to this podcast and believes that it's useful for them and enjoys it and likes you and me, I prefer that over I think that's bullshit and I think Keith's a jerk. I mean,
yeah.
So that's always there. But if the superordinate motivation system is being true to my core values and moving forward onto what I identify as a path that's consistent with my values and a sense of sacred purpose, if that's the superordinate motivation system, then the other stuff still happens, but it's not that significant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's great to win. If I go out and do something competitive, but I lost. Okay. Is there anything I can learn from it? Usually. Learn something, move forward, and declare victory.
So help me understand that. And I think a lot of the people listening will feel this as well. If I lose that desire to win, or I lose that, maybe it's the negative self-talk, or if I lose the push and the striving, I lose my edge. And I feel it in my body as you're talking. It's sort of making sense, but I'm having a visceral reaction to it. Like, well, but I can't lose that.
Yeah. We developed these are primitive motivation systems when we're little. Little kids think in black and white terms.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm never good enough. Always be better. Never be satisfied. These are winning formulas. These are winning strategies. So you want a winning strategy? Never be satisfied. Always be striving, and you'll have success. You'll get you'll have success, not just objectively, like, you get grades or you get, athletic success. You get approved of by other people.
Mm-hmm.
Ronaldo Nehemiah said, anytime I'm not training, I'm thinking one of my opponents somewhere on this planet is training. And so I assume he ended up overtraining because that's the formula for overtraining. So we start with those, and they deliver for high performance.
Mm-hmm.
They really do. I want to be the best. That delivers. I want to make the most money. That delivers. I want my company to be the biggest company ever. That delivers. I want to keep growing. That delivers. I want to buy that company, fire 30% of the people, and then make it more lean and mean, make it more effective, and then sell it for twice as much as I bought it for. That delivers. And I want to do it. And if I can't do it, I feel like a failure.
Mm-hmm.
Those things deliver, right? As you grow, though, you begin to encounter life. You begin to encounter life is a bunch of processes and relationships that we manage. And as it turns out, the growth mindset of effort and progress being more desirable than having to win all the time leads to more success, more happiness, and more connectedness. As it turns out, as we mature and have more perspectives and more capacities, we begin to notice that harmonious life is both more joyful and more successful. One of the definitions of success is flexible and adaptable. That's also one of the definitions of psychological health. In psychocybernetics, which is the study of human systems, there's a principle called Ashby's law of requisite variety, which says that if whatever the number of disturbances in the system, you need to have at least that number of options or the system degrades. And that the person that has the most embodied options in a system is the person that has the most power in the system. Flexible and adaptable. Okay? So anything that blocks a capacity, that blocks an option, gives the other person an edge. It's not like compensatory goals are and motivation systems are necessarily bad. There's ones that are healthy and unhealthy, or the integrative ones are always good. Yeah, there's some that actually don't serve the highest good, as it turns out, and some that do. But in general, as people develop, it becomes more integrated. They want to achieve in ways that are consistent with their values, and their values are more universalizing values of growth mindsets, universalizing values of wanting to expand a harmonious life, feeling a sense of, if I want to compete, I want to compete in a way where there's somehow integrity and joy involved. I think that you see this in pro sport. That particular approach to coaching and towards teams is superior. And so now pretty much all teams either adopt that or pay lip service to it, because the alternative is can't compete, because people who are joyfully organizing and self-organizing with other people and joyfully collaborating do better. This is true, by the way, in teams in business. This has been studied with group intelligence. A group that has group intelligence has purpose, has a mission, has a sense of agency, has a self-identity, and it has people who put their own kind of stuff aside to a larger goal. Now, within the context of that, if you're in a culture that rewards overwork, the person who's working himself to death then fits in fine in that system, but they break down. And this comes to the whole thing of whatever we're doing, it's rarely a sprint, it's always a marathon. And my belief is that people that take care of their physical, psychological, emotional health and allow themselves to be in environments where they put a larger purpose ahead with other people that are kind of doing that with them. Certainly the group intelligence research shows that works better, because this is something that companies strive for in their teams. Sometimes get it, sometimes don't. And generally where they don't get it is where they have blind spots. They have blind spots in selection. They have blind spots in terms of who has personality disorders or not. They have blind spots in terms of their motivation system. They have blind spots in terms of why people stay at jobs and leave jobs. People don't leave jobs mostly because of money. People leave jobs mostly because they're not getting the recognition for what they do, not being included in the group, or they're not being treated fairly. Those are the things that make your good employees leave. Okay?
Yeah.
And so if you have an organization like that and somebody comes in and they got a lot of integrative goals and they want to create group intelligence, those capacities will get degraded by that larger culture. This is one of the things that Max and I made a point of in our paper. You have internal psychological structures that are more compensatory or more integrative, but you also have goals themselves. If you're in an organization where they fire the 10% who are least producers that year, that's a compensatory goal. I want to achieve so that I don't get fired. So that's a culture that has compensatory goals. My friend Sean Esborn-Hargens wrote a book on ecology that talks about this, that there's lots of forms of capital in an organization. So money is one. I mean, you got to be in the black. If you have a business, you want to make money, that's of course. But then the health of the individuals, that's capital. The contribution to the environment, that's a form of capital. Whether it's moving, it's contributing to the collective or degrading the collective, that's, you wanted to contribute, that's capital. Is it consistent with core values in the organization? Organizations that don't have some sense of core mission and are true to it tend to fall apart, particularly within 1 or 2 generations, if you're looking at a generational thing, family businesses. So there's this intricate interplay between the nature of goals, nature of interior motivational structures, the nature of organizations themselves, and development as people grow and develop. And one of the things that I say to people that feel like they have to go put in 60 hours that are going to get criticized, tell people, I encourage you to not do that. I encourage you, if you're signed up for 40 hours, put in 40 hours. Somebody gives you a hard time, so what? Now, it's easy for me to say because then I'm not there in the law firm, not making partner. But, in that environment, I'm still going to encourage a person, put in the hours that you committed and then have a great life, have a healthy life. And in the long run, my experience and my belief is that that's what's best for people. And that's what's best for success, that your performance goes up in those situations.
So let's touch on that a little bit, because that's one of the areas of pushback that we get. I've had conversations with someone who's trying to be the best in the world and was told by a performance psychologist, you got to stop pushing like this. You should just operate at about 70% because you'll still be good enough at 70%. And it just doesn't sit with someone who's trying to be the best in the world that they're going to operate at 70%. I feel like there's a certain intensity that comes with being the best in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so what does it look like to be able to work with the intensity that is going to be required to be the best, but not enter into this sort of self-destructive cycle where your health is deteriorating? And I think there might be sort of seasons to it where, we're starting a business. And so for the first 2 years, you work every hour God sends, right? Like you just going because you're trying to get into the black. How do we go from that push to leveling out to a more sustainable pace?
Mm-hmm.
And how do we transition from this compensatory motivation system into more integrated? Because I feel like there's some turbulence as that happens as well, right? I don't think that's an easy switch for people to make.
Part of it has to do is working with the psychology that you've discovered yourself to have. Magic Johnson was born joyful. So it's easy for him to learn how to compete joyfully. He wanted to win as much as Larry Bird, who was born kind of depressed, as far as I can tell. Certainly way more reserved. Okay.
Right.
Now, either one of them, if you went into their consciousness when they were doing their thing, when they were involved, when they were on the court, and measured it, you would get all the signs of joy.
Mm-hmm.
When you're approaching success, except I'm talking about Jeremy now. If we were, measuring your biochemistry, right up into the moment of success, there's a part of you that's going, yeah, and then finally it happens. But and then you get this whole thing about, oh boy, I better subdue myself and not celebrate too much. But right before that happened, right before the last second ticked off and your team won, all right? Those 10 seconds, those last 10 seconds, we're in Jeremy's psychology. There's lots of joy happening right there.
Right. That's really interesting because that actually played out, like specifically, I think we might have talked about this, but Game 7, Brooklyn Nets against the Raptors. Last play of the game, and everybody's excited and into it. Last play of the game, Kyle Lowry's bringing the ball down, and he had been just getting call after call after call from the refs. And I think that we were up 2, maybe. We might have been up 1. And Kyle brings the ball up and Paul Pierce blocks his shot. And that's the end of the game. We win game 7 in Toronto. And we're going on to the second round. And right up until that moment, exactly as you said, we're excited. We're like intense and into it. And the buzzer goes and the bench explodes. And there's a picture of that moment. The bench, everybody just joyful, arms in the air. And there's me leaning on the back of a chair with just no affect whatsoever. Just like looking at the court, just like the only person. And the media guy actually brought that photo over to me and was like, look at this.
There you go.
So that played out like in real time.
In real time. And so, okay, when you run into something like that, you go, okay, now I have a challenge. My challenge is to allow that sense of triumph to permeate and change that value, to refine it. You know, the value of not wanting to show off and stand out and, you know, whatever, that's not a bad value. And the capacity to celebrate, actually, what it does is it bonds you with your tribe. And so the primitive form of that value ended up disconnecting you from your tribe. So you didn't get to connect with them and join with them. Every tribe in human history has times where they all get together, and what do? They sing and dance. And they join in ecstatic states. And that bonds them together and makes them, as ultra-social people, makes them feel one. And there's something beautiful and good and communal about that. Modern day, we see it at rock concerts all the time. You feel yourself part of that. And we crave that because we're ultra-social. Human beings do badly when they're disconnected. Okay? So if you have a habit that disconnects you, you go, that's a bad habit. I want to trade that in on a good habit of being connected. And then what does that do? It gives you more options, more flexible and adaptable. And what does that do? It gives you more power in whatever system you're in. And what does that do? That gives you higher performance. Abraham Maslow is famous for developing what he calls his hierarchy of needs, which is actually a hierarchy of motivations. The first one is survival needs, like breath. Okay. Right. You know, if you deprive us of air, that pretty much takes precedence over, you know, everything. I'm not really worried about my taxes if I have trouble breathing. Okay. But there's survival needs, but then there's comfort needs. You know, I'd rather be warm than freezing, comfortable. Then right after that is belonging needs, because, you know, we need to feel like we belong. And we need to feel like we belong in every social hierarchy that culture that we value. So if you value being in your family, you want to feel like you belong. If you value being in your team, you want to feel like you belong. You value being in your country, you want to feel like you belong. Belonging needs. There was also what he called cognitive needs. What he meant by that was purpose. We want to have purpose. We want to have something that we do that feels important to us, somehow larger than ourselves. People that have that do better. People that don't have that do worse. There's a lot of studies about people with purpose living longer, those kinds of things, being healthier. We also have aesthetic needs. We want to create beauty. We have self-esteem needs. We want to feel good about ourselves. Now, part of that is we want to feel like we fit in, but we want to feel like we're a good person. Usually, we want to feel like we're virtuous for following our values. Now, you notice how this starts falling to pieces. If one of my values is I'm never good enough, okay, so how does that fit in with my need to feel like enough? It doesn't. That creates an interior conflict that has to be addressed. And, you know, you keep addressing it until that value of wanting to continue to progress, but needing to be satisfied with who I am at this present moment fit together. And now I can have self-esteem while still wanting to continue to grow.
Well, I think that's actually a really good point. Like with it's almost like the long-term versus short-term.
Mhm.
Like it's okay that wasn't good enough. And so we will do that better next time
Mhm.
and continue on. It's not, I am no good. And so long as you evolve past that, I'm trying to think how best to put it. So long as that's a transient state, like that wasn't good enough,
Mhm.
don't do
Yes.
that again. Right. And so it integrates in and we carry on.
It's another form of growth. Yeah.
I think where I've struggled is I have made the correction over and over and over again, but have never integrated, never allowed myself to experience that and be good enough.
Yeah. And feel the pleasure and the gratitude to be someone who makes corrections and grows. I'm grateful to be that kind of person. I've deliberately worked to grow to be that kind of person. I like being that kind of person. I'm grateful I get to do it. And so that particular, so self-esteem, that moves into self-actualization. Self-actualization is being purely yourself without blocks, living your values and experiencing yourself as living your values. Self-actualization was at the top of the Maslow hierarchy when he first developed it. Interestingly, as he continued to study high performance, he realized there were stages after self-actualization. He called it self-transcendence. He said, they stop identifying primarily with being a separate person. They start identifying with being part of something else. They discovered it's fun when someone gives you recognition, but I don't need recognition. These are the people that we see and we go, God, that person's a saint. Nobody embodies these things all the time. We're just talking about people that embody them a fair amount of the time. People are too complex. You're never really at any level of maturity. You're just the level of maturity you are right now. And you can regress all the way to 2 years old in 10 minutes. You can, or you can have a peak experience of being wise beyond your years. But gradually over time, there's more wisdom and less, regression if you develop.
Yeah.
And that's true for high performance. And in general, and when I teach people spiritual practices, meditations and stuff, I do that occasionally, because people want to have that connection to the sacred. And in this secular society, they hunger for it. And so, part of what I provide is that, because, you want to provide bridges to spirit to people, because it's all around all the time, right? When people are doing, that kind of practice, one of the things I say is so you do a practice where you feel something extraordinary, say unity with everything. I say, so keep doing that practice until that experience is an ordinary experience. So Stephen Curry, it's an ordinary experience for him to make a 3-point basket. All right. LeBron James, is an ordinary experience for him to take over a game and win it. Okay. Because he's done it so many times. So what you do with mastery is you just keep practicing. You have these little peaks, these extraordinary, and then you just keep learning them and practicing them and embodying them until they become ordinary. And then when they're ordinary, okay, your foundation has gone up. We were talking earlier about what gives people the edge. The best tennis players, the ones at the top, what happened with them is when you got to the big points, they played a little better, and the other people who were the best in the world played a little worse, maybe 1%. And that's enough to get them at the top. And mostly when they're doing that, there's something self-transcended there. They become something other than just them. They become something beyond that's unobstructed. And that mystical place, that beautiful place is, I can't do that with competition because I have too much empathy. When I played tennis, if somebody was really suffering when they were losing, my game would go down. Poor guy. He just hates. You got to be able to dissociate from your opponent's suffering. But,
or actually enjoy it.
or enjoy it. Yeah. Enjoying it is another thing. There you go.
Yeah.
And, that could work too. Though it's weird. You're enjoying it, but it's within the context of some kind of mutual respect, usually, unless you're one of the people who just literally wants to kill your opponent.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of nuances to this. But here's one of the interesting things. Awareness regulates. So if you're aware of your motivations, and there's always multiple motivations, that regulates them to wherever you want to regulate. And, generally you want to regulate towards integrative motivations. Generally when we feel coherent, consistent with our values, we do better. That's true for almost every arena.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things that we've worked on as I've been on this journey is the compassionate witness. And I think a hallmark of my journey and many, many other high performers is a very harsh self-critic. It's one of the things that keeps me from enjoying success, because I can always see the things I didn't do well. No matter what I achieve, I can see what needs to be better. Oh, I could have done that better. Oh, I could have done this better. And it shows up all over, like a reflex response. Michelle will say, "Oh, you're looking fit." "Oh, it's because I'm wearing a fitted t-shirt." All right, immediately, it's like this.
Discount. I just
got to deflect it.
Yeah,
like with expert. Yeah, it's my martial art.
Yeah,
and so tell us a bit about the compassionate witness, because it can feel like lowering the bar versus removing the threat from the bar. Can you explain that a little bit for us?
Remember, we learn our motivation systems when we have primitive brains. So a 1-year-old, starts to break the cup, and mom says no. He feels disapproved of, blushes, feels a sense of shame, puts the cup down. A little social learning is taking place, but also there's that sense of basically being attacked, criticized for breaking a rule. Okay, 2 years old, you've internalized rules. And now you're by yourself and you steal your brother's cookie, as he left on his thing, and you feel guilty. And then you either do a defense, you blame the dog for eating it, or you go, "Oh, I was bad." Okay. Now, these are superpowers. These capacities are what make us ultra social. These are the kind of the reasons that 8 billion people are getting along pretty well on this planet. The news focuses on horrible stuff, but mostly 8 billion people get along. So those inner critics that we internalized, in Gestalt, we call them introjects. We internalize the parent that said, "No, don't do that." You internalize the person who says, "What are you, stupid?" So those voices sound familiar. They sound like those critics. Okay, so you grow up and that's there. And that's part of the stuff that you're describing. So say you go to a therapist, like I did. I went to therapy. Part of it is the first thing that you do is you go, "I want to get rid of that critic." As if you can do a criticectomy, like a tumor or something. And
I'm still trying.
I know. You're really hard to sell. So you realize that doesn't work. That you got to recognize that inner critic is there to help you develop and thrive. But they're doing it in an aggressive fashion. They're doing it in a primitive fashion. Mm-hmm. And so the challenge is you need to grow literally that side of yourself to be more effective at helping you navigate the world and have a joyful, healthy life. And so rather than avoid that critic, which everybody tries to do, most people try to do, you encounter it. And there's lots of systems. Gestalt used to do the empty chair. Internal family systems has names. There's a manager that wants to tell you how bad you are. And there's the exile you want to get rid of because, they're weak. And you go, no. What we want to do is we want everybody to be included and helped and organized. And you want to grow that critic so that you're saying, this is how you optimize my performance. Essentially, we're talking about high performance all day, right? Okay, so high performance is you tell me where the growth opportunity is. Tell me what I did wrong. If there's somebody that I hurt, help me make amends. And let's move on in a way that is stronger and wiser. One of the books, if you go to my website, there's 10 books that I'm offering, 9 of them for free. 8 of them I published with publishers, 2 of them I published on my website. There's just one that I only own half of it. So Loving Completely, you got to buy that from Amazon. But one of the books that I have there is Trauma into Transcendence. It's about treating trauma. And one of the points that I make is that the way you deal with trauma is you need to feel stronger and wiser on the other side. And so part of that is encountering whatever those critics are, those parts, and helping them grow into being more guides because they want you to do well. Somebody's criticizing me, they're criticizing me. But even if somebody, I make a wrong turn and somebody honks at me and calls me an asshole, okay? That person, one, they want to punish me for scaring them, but 2, they want me to be a better driver. They literally, if you ask them, he said, that guy should know better. I wanted to let him know that he made a mistake. He's trying to help me be a better driver by yelling at me. Okay. And so if I have an inner figure like that, my job is to help it grow. And so that's what we do. And over time, that's what happens. And that creates a more of an integrated consciousness that allows us to have more self-actualization and more self-transcendence, more of those moments. Also allows us to have more high performance because harmony creates more high performance. And harmony is everything. It's body, mind, spirit, and self, culture, and nature. We say in integral. That's pretty much everything. Body, mind, and spirit in self, culture, and nature. All of them matter. And our job as a self-aware conscious being is to harmonize them and then serve the highest good.
So we're not asking people to lower performance.
Not at all.
We're asking them to look at how they relate to themselves while they perform.
Yeah, and to grow.
Right.
To always be growing. That you're not growing, you're growing partly because you want to compete with your competitors if you're in a competitive environment. But you're also growing because life wants to grow. Bruce Lipton said in The Biology of Belief that cells are either defending or growing. People in a way are either defending or growing. Another way of looking at people, they're either fighting or playing with themselves and other people. If I'm fighting with you or I'm fighting with myself, I can be successful, but fighting is metabolically demanding. If I'm playing, I'm going to get tired, but some part of me is being nourished by my play, my inner forces, or with you. And that gives me a competitive edge, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's how I always looked at performance with the athletes and with the coaches and the staff. We weren't there to protect them from performance. We didn't give days off and we didn't give recovery and have all these treatments to protect them and to back them off performing. Our support staff were there to push them so they could perform harder.
Yeah.
If we practiced and played 7 days a week, we'd be more injured, we'd be slower, we'd be more fatigued, we'd lose more games.
Yeah.
But having regular periods of recovery and reflection and time away allowed us all to perform at a higher level when it was critical. Mm-hmm. It's a little more intuitive in sport to approach it that way because you have these windows of specific performance. It's the day-to-day, a lot of the executives we work with now, it's every single day. And so it's a more difficult periodization of effort that we come across because you have to perform every single day. Here's the other thing with high performers. We've talked a lot about the change and what we would like them to do. They want something to do. How do they do this? Like, what are the actions that they can take every day to be able to make this transformation happen?
My website is drkeithwitt.com, drkeithwitt.com. So if you go on and sign up, you'll get an email blast once or twice a month if there's a talk I'm giving or something. Nothing else happens. It's free and everything. So there's a reason that there's 10 books on that. And I've written 14. I didn't bother to publish 4 of the other ones. There's a reason that there's hundreds of blogs and videos. All that stuff all together is what you do.
Right.
So it's endless. Arguably the number one component of happiness and health in anybody's life is their primary relationship, because we're a pair bond species. In Sweden, guys that had a good relationship, they were healthier than guys that smoked, were overweight, and drank. If you can believe that.
Right.
Well, all right. So having a good relationship then has all these huge benefits on everything. Well, there's principles involved. That's my book, Loving Incompletely. What if you have trauma learning? Trauma is a memory system, as is resilience. We want to become more resilient. Well, that's why my book, Trauma into Transcendence, you learn how to turn trauma into resilience. That's what you do, trauma memories into resilience. What about, the whole thing of struggling with a sense of self? I have a book called The Gift of Shame. I mean, it's not like I'm promoting all my books here. My point about that is that all these dimensions are super important dimensions. And you have a sense as you navigate your life, what's working and what's not working. And so it's a good idea to pay attention to that. Now, this brings us back to the compassionate witness. Self-observation is the key to everything. Some of us are born way able to be self-aware, self-observe. And 15 to 19% of the population has this pretty much no capacity to self-observe themselves making mistakes. They can learn, but they're born basically with a disability in that area. Quite fascinating, really. The part of us that has the most compassionate understanding of ourselves and other people is the closest part of us to wise self. This is my belief. My belief around 4 or 5 years old, when your hippocampus kind of comes on fully online, there's a certain level of complexity that the human brain hits. I mean, you have more brain cells at that point than any other point in your life, where there's a wise self in there. And everyone, anybody who raised kids, your 5-year-old or your 6-year-old will say that. Most beautiful, wise things. Just where did that come from? And I think that wise self is always there. And it was there from the very beginning to a certain extent, from that sense of unity that we had in the womb, which is actually a memory system also. We're laying down memories the last trimester. And it's either inhibited or supported in development. And we can develop that wise self that's the compassionate witness, that's observing us and others with compassion. Compassionate self-observation is superior. Compassionate other observations, compassionate understanding is superior. And that part of us that has the most compassionate for ourselves and other people, that's the closest to our wise self. I encourage people to activate that and to check in with it a lot. I encourage you to ask yourself what feels right in your heart. Asking yourself what feels right in your heart is another way of saying, what does your wise self say? Okay. And I encourage people, if I'm going to make mistakes in my life, okay, I'll take the ones where I'm doing something that feels right in my heart. And so,
and do you ask that, Keith, just to give people like that, a practical sense of that exercise? Is that when you're at a crossroad or a decision point, or is that just at various points throughout the day? How would you execute that?
Throughout the day. For instance, there's a practice that I teach. I taught it in the last podcast. And we won't go through the whole practice, but it's, you breathe in your abdomen, you feel your breath going in and out, which brings you to the present moment. Always a good idea. And then you become aware of your sensation and your emotion with acceptance and caring intent. In other words, compassion. Now, as you're aware of emotion and sensation, you become aware of your thoughts. with acceptance and carrying intent. And then your judgments, positive and negative, critical and supportive, with acceptance and the carrying intent. And then your desires with acceptance and carrying intent. So that practice of sensation, breath, sensation, emotion, thought, judgment, desire, with acceptance and carrying intent is practicing compassionate understanding of self. Now, if I look at you and I imagine what's going on with you emotionally, what your thoughts are, what your judgments might be, what you're wanting right now with acceptance and carrying intent. Now I'm cultivating compassionate understanding of you by attuning to you. But very specifically, I wonder what you're feeling. They've discovered, there was one study that was done, was fascinating. They took a whole bunch of at-risk single mothers where their kids were really at risk for being criminals later on in life. They sent a nurse to the house every week, and the nurse taught these women how to do three things with these kids. One, treat them like normal people, because the kids were not acting normal. They were hostile, aggressive, most of them, a lot of them. Treat them like they're normal. You're a normal person. I expect normal stuff. Second, teach them empathy. When you call me a jerk, I feel bad. How do you think that little boy felt when you hit him? He probably felt bad. You'd feel bad if you got hit, right? Maybe you should go say, I'm sorry I hit you. And then they taught him problem solving. Problem solving is not complaining or raising your level of emotional intensity or collapsing or saying everything sucks when there's a problem. It's like, okay, I got a problem. Let's solve it. And 40%, those kids, that group, had 40% less problems when they were teenagers. So I think this is true for all of us. Let's all relate to each other as, we all have souls. We all have precious human bodies. We all have human superpowers. Humans have superpowers. Normal human being has superpowers that are just above and beyond anything else any other creatures ever had. Let's all treat each other like that. Let's all be empathic with each other. Let's solve problems when we hit them. Let's not complain about problems. Let's solve them. Now, when you do that, what happens? High performance is what happens. And if you have a part of you that's cultivating compassionate witness, that wise self, that compassionate understanding of yourself and other people, you're noticing when the problems show up, and then you're noticing what works and what doesn't work, and keep making adjustments, and you grow.
I think that's where, Keith, I think that's where a lot of high performers struggle with therapy. They go to therapy and sit and talk about your problems. So what? What do I do about it? Right? Like
Right.
They struggle in that environment where it just feels like a bitching session. You're just complaining and complaining. And so you sort of like, are we just going to complain about this, or are we going to do something about it? And so I think this action-oriented approach is important.
Yeah, I think there's brilliant therapists all over the place. Thousands. I mean, there's a lot. It's a hierarchy just like anything else. You get therapeutic relief when you go and you complain and somebody listens sympathetically, which is fine. Some people want therapeutic relief, but as a psychologist, at some point there's an opportunity to say, okay, so I understand that sucks and he sucks and she sucks or whatever sucks. Yeah. But also, here's an opportunity to grow. And they go, well, sure, I'll do that. Okay. Or no, I don't want to do that. Well, I'm curious why you don't want to do that opportunity, take that opportunity to grow. Now we're dealing with therapeutic change. Okay. And again, I don't mind providing relief for people, but I'm always going to lean into, here's our opportunity for therapeutic change. And over time, when you have another human being that's doing that with you, it has beneficial effects. You grow. Now, yeah, you can come up with lots of examples of terrible therapy, but there's lots of examples of being a terrible cop, and examples of being a terrible fireman. Lots of examples of being, a terrible parent. Sure, but there's lots of examples of being a superior cop and a superior fireman, teacher, superior therapist, and so that's where we want to go. And if you want to. If you start studying therapy, you want to climb the pyramid, and climbing the pyramid is getting better at stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I'm motivated to climb that pyramid.
And that's how it was, I think, in sport. One of the things that I would always tell young practitioners, particularly coming into pro sport for the first time, was that they were likely never again going to be limited by what they know. They were going to be limited by how they were able to impact change.
Yes.
Were they able to get somebody to change their behavior in order to create better performance or to solve the problem?
Yes.
And I feel like this is the same thing with these high performers, is that I think it can be intimidating sometimes to deal with somebody who's at a very, very high level, because they've achieved mastery in a lot of areas. And so to challenge them and point out areas they can grow and move them towards high performance, I think that's a difficult skill to develop that comes, I think, with experience. And maybe there's some natural personality traits that help with that.
That's right. That's in my practice, for whatever reason, my consciousness is such that whatever level someone can go, interpersonally, spiritually, psychologically, I can take them at least a half step farther. I can see that far. And maybe that comes from all the studies and all the work that I've done. Maybe it was a natural skill that got developed. I don't know. And one cool thing about that is that territory of going a half step farther, that's blissful territory. And that's what all of us do in the coaches, therapists, trainers. We all look for that. Where's that growth edge? It doesn't matter where they are in any kind of level. What matters is that there's that edge. They come to you. You go to that edge. You look for that place. You inhabit it with them. And if they're receiving influence, they'll move in that direction. And there's something very beautiful and sacred about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, Keith, I can tell you that, I think I've run a marathon on all the steps that you've advanced me over the years. It's 15 years we've worked together now. So
15 years.
Yeah. I just I think for high performers, just from my own takeaway, my own experience going through this process, my journey here to go from professional sport, where it was almost entirely external validation, very, very high performing environment, but all, you've got the logo on your sweater, you're getting a pat on the back everywhere you go. The media are interested in you. You got a lot of followers on Instagram, all the rest of it. And then to come out of sport and try and build this for myself, or for ourselves, Michelle and I, building this together now based on our values and how we want to interact with people, and very much in the shadows. Nobody's interested. We do this, so.
Other than the people that know what you have to offer and come to you to transform, and you go, okay, sure, we'll help you transform, and we know how to do it. We can guide you in that direction if they're willing to do it. And some of them are, and look what you're doing with these people. Look at how they're healing from their injuries. Look at how they're gaining vitality and strength and balance. It's pretty magic, Jeremy.
Well, it is, and it's even some things as we're having this conversation today are sort of clicking around that transition, where this is a much more value-oriented expression of what we're able to do. There's a lot less external pressure to change the system based on an immediate result. We lost last night. This guy must be out of shape. Change the strength conditioning system.
Yeah, right.
Well, that's not how that works, right? We played 60 games of hockey. He's not out of shape, right? He might be tired. And so these are the things that, like, now we're able to have this system where we can pull in anything we want and anything that we know is going to be impactful. And there's nobody else's comfort that we're limited by. And I think that's, for me, the essence of what can happen once we move away from the external validation and into a more value-oriented system. We're never trying to get you to perform at a lower level. We're trying to get you to get the stuff out of the way that limits your performance?
Well, I think one of the advantages of your system is that you're not a medical doctor. Medical doctors are, and psychologists too. I mean, when I got my psychologist license, I kind of had to deprogram myself after I passed the test to be able to kind of learn the things that I had to kind of put aside. What I mean, like, for instance, I was encouraged to believe drug company studies. No, Keith. I don't trust any study where they won't show the raw data to anybody. I mean, so one thing that you have is that there's a world of valid interventions, and you really are basically you're the ultimate pragmatist and systems person. That you're willing to enable to look at someone's entire system and say, whatever is needed, we can find superior people to provide that and have that fit into everything else. And I'm not limited by anything other than what makes you thrive. That's it. I'm not limited by training. I'm not limited even by licensure. I'm limited by, there's no limit other than if there's something that will help you thrive. And I'm aware of it because that's what excites you to know that, able to notice those things. It's just such an amazing thing to be able to do that and do it. And this is why the people that you work with are so happy with you.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. It's been a journey getting to that point, for Michelle and I, but it's been a worthwhile one and just a necessary one for my own subjective experience of performance.
Yeah.
And I think that's the message for me that I want people to take away is that this can also be enjoyable.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to just be a grind.
No. You need to enjoy it. It's enjoyable to grow. I mean, it's an enjoyable thing.
And Keith, what would be 3 things that you would want people to take from this conversation and put into their lives?
First of all, to recognize we all have superpowers. If you're a person listening to this, you have superpowers. Focused intent and action in service of principle and driven by resolve over time creates miracles. That's one of the books that I didn't publish. It was called Mindful Manifestation. And by superpowers, I mean, where do you want to grow? You put that focus and knowing you have superpowers and that since we're ultra social, find somebody that has compassion and wisdom in the areas you want to grow and get influence from them and embody that influence. That's the second thing. Find people that you trust who are caring people, compassion for themselves and others. Tell them where you want to grow and then they'll give you input and then use it. Okay? And then the third thing is remember to be grateful for our opportunity to be alive and to love and to grow, to hear this, be able to embody it. And so in that, I believe I experience all of us connected energetically. There's good physics around that. And so I feel everybody. I feel all consciousness and I feel all people's consciousness. And it's a comforting thing. And I know basically that force wants everything to be good for all of us, including me. So if I'm aware of my superpowers and if I receive that influence and I'm grateful for the opportunity to grow and so on, things are going to work out pretty darn well. So I encourage everybody listening to those things and be patient. Be joyful when you find yourself succeeding because you're going to.
I'll try and be patient.
There you go.
We will work towards it.
That's right. Easy to say, hard to do. But so what? Okay, you get. Remember, Remember, Criterion velocity of 1. Just be a little bit more patient today, and that's good enough. Okay, Criterion velocity of 1.
Exactly right. Keith, you mentioned your website. Can you just repeat that so people know where to go and find you and your content and where they can reach out?
Yeah, drkeithwitt.com. If you sign up, we'll send you a little 5-minute video about something that I think is important every week for 12 weeks. I mean, watch it if you want. And on that, all my classes are free. All my books are free except for that one. All the videos, all the blogs. Just look at that stuff. Use it. It's all about everything imaginable: relationships, parenting, sexuality, high achievement, performance, everything. Use it and use it to love and grow. It's called the School of Love because that's the bottom line, right?
Nice. Yeah.
That's the bottom line for all of us.
Amazing. Well, Keith, thank you so much for your time today and your wisdom and always coming on and contributing to our project here with the podcast.
My pleasure.
Keith, thank you. 50 years of practice and still finding new edges to push into. Here are the 3 key things to take away. First, you have superpowers. Focused intent and action in service of principle sustained over time. That produces real results. Aim it at where you want to grow. Second, find people with compassion and wisdom in the areas you want to develop. Tell them where you want to grow. Take the input seriously and embody it. Third, be grateful. Not as a platitude, as a daily practice for the opportunity to be alive, to love, and to grow. If this episode resonated with you, the best way to support the show is to follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts and leave a rating or a review. It makes a real difference in helping us reach more people who could benefit from these conversations. You can stay connected with us on Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube at Vitality Collective Performance, where we share additional insights, behind-the-scenes content, and updates on upcoming episodes. The information shared in this episode is for educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Always consult a qualified healthcare professional before making any changes to your training, recovery, or health practices. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.